It was a day like any other when Captain Ryan Walker, a highly skilled human soldier, found himself summoned to the command center. He had been stationed on the far edges of the galaxy, far from Earth's familiar ground. Ryan's mission was simple, or so it seemed. A diplomatic, peacekeeping mission to an alien empire known for its vast power and long history. He had dealt with alien species before, but this one was different. The Zorath Empire was a force to be reckoned with, one that had defeated entire fleets of invading forces in the past, and its people were known for their pride and powers. He stepped into the command room. The tension in the air was almost palpable. The commander, a seasoned officer, greeted him with a somber look. "Captain Walker," the officer began, "we've received new orders from the Council of United Systems. You're being assigned to the Zorath Empire to oversee the treaty negotiations." Ryan nodded. He was used to being given orders, but the gravity of this mission was different. He knew that the Zorath were not to be underestimated, and their demands could be harsh. Yet he had always excelled in difficult situations. He took pride in his ability to handle even the toughest diplomatic talks. "I'll do my best, sir," Ryan replied, his voice calm and firm. But nothing could have prepared him for what came next. The officer looked at him with a strange expression, almost apologetic. "There's one more detail. You're not just going for the talks, Captain. You've been selected for a special role." Ryan raised an eyebrow. Special role? He had a bad feeling about this. "The Emperor has requested that you marry his youngest daughter, Princess Zira. It's part of a political agreement to strengthen the alliance between our two civilizations." Ryan's eyes widened in disbelief. He had faced dangerous battles, countless missions, and hostile encounters, but never had he imagined being forced into a marriage with an alien princess. He was a soldier, not a diplomat, and certainly not a pawn in some royal game. "I'm sorry, sir. Did you just say marry?" Ryan asked, his voice tinged with confusion and frustration. "I'm here to negotiate, not to marry." The officer nodded gravely. "The Emperor believes it will strengthen the bond between our species. You are to accompany Princess Zira and ensure that the treaty goes through. Her role in the Empire is crucial, and this marriage will solidify our standing." Ryan couldn't believe what he was hearing. A marriage to a princess he had never met? The very thought of being thrust into such an arrangement felt wrong. He had no interest in politics, let alone marrying someone as a tool for diplomacy. His job was simple: keep the peace. But this was beyond anything he had expected. Still, duty was duty. He couldn't back out now. "I'll do it," Ryan said reluctantly, though his mind raced. He had no choice. The stakes were too high. This was an opportunity to secure the future of Earth and its allies. He would have to play his part, even if it meant sacrificing his own personal feelings. Later that day, Ryan was escorted to a massive palace, its towering spires reaching toward the sky and its golden walls shimmering in the light. The Zorath Empire was known for its grandeur, but Ryan felt an uneasy weight in the air. He had been briefed on the customs of the Empire, but nothing could prepare him for the alien culture he was about to be thrust into. As he entered the grand hall of the palace, he was introduced to the Emperor, a tall figure cloaked in dark robes, his eyes filled with a calm but powerful presence. Next to him stood Princess Zira, the youngest of his daughters. Ryan's first impression was that she was striking, tall, elegant, and carrying herself with the kind of authority that most rulers would envy. Her long silver hair flowed like a river of light, and her eyes, the color of deep emerald, held a glimmer of something he couldn't quite place. She wasn't the typical princess he'd imagined, fragile, sweet, and delicate. No. Zira had an aura of strength around her, an intensity that made Ryan's pulse quicken in an unfamiliar way. "Captain Walker, welcome to my court," the Emperor said with a slight bow of his head. I hope you find our hospitality to your liking. Ryan nodded stiffly, still in shock. Your Highness, it's an honor. The Emperor turned to Zira, his gaze settling on his daughter. Princess Zira, I trust you will take care of the captain and ensure his comfort during his stay. He is here to secure peace, and our alliance will benefit us all. Ryan couldn't help but notice the way the Emperor spoke to Zira, almost as if she were a mere tool to further his own plans. It made him uneasy, but he knew better than to question a ruler's authority, especially in such a delicate situation. But it was clear that the princess wasn't particularly thrilled about this arrangement either. The way her eyes flashed with defiance spoke volumes. She wasn't going to accept this marriage quietly. As the days passed, Ryan spent more time with Princess Zira. He quickly learned that she wasn't the quiet, obedient princess he had expected. Instead, she was sharp, intelligent, and fiercely independent. Their conversations often started with tense silences, as neither of them knew how to navigate the awkwardness of their forced engagement. Zira wasn't interested in being married off for political gain, and Ryan didn't care for being used as a pawn in a royal scheme. Despite their differences, there was something compelling about her, something that made him want to understand her better, even if he didn't want to be part of her life in this way. Zira, for her part, didn't want to marry anyone, let alone a human. She had always dreamed of ruling her empire on her terms, without being shackled by traditions and alliances. The idea of marrying a human, someone from a species she viewed as inferior, was both insulting and frustrating. She had spent her life preparing to lead, not to be a trophy for political games, but duty called. As much as she resented the decision, she understood the necessity of it. The peace between their empires depended on this marriage. Her father, the Emperor, had made it clear that this was not up for debate. The alliance had to be secured, and if her marriage was the price, then so be it. As the days passed, Captain Ryan Walker found himself spending more time with Princess Zira. They were forced into a situation neither had wanted, and it was becoming clear that neither of them was entirely comfortable with the arrangement. What had started as an awkward, tense relationship began to take on new layers. For Ryan, there was something fascinating about Zira. He had expected her to be like many princesses he'd heard about, prim, proper, and somewhat distant. But Zira was different. Princess Zira had a presence that no one could ignore. She was more than just a royal figurehead. Ryan soon discovered that she was incredibly intelligent and had a strategic mind. When they spoke, her sharp insights about diplomacy and military tactics surprised him. She wasn't just a political pawn. She was a leader in her own right. Even though her marriage had been forced upon her, she never stopped thinking about how to protect her people and her empire. One afternoon, after an intense meeting with the Emperor regarding the treaty, Ryan and Zira found themselves alone in one of the palace's many gardens. The sunlight filtered through the branches of ancient trees, casting soft patterns on the ground. It was a quiet space, the kind of place where one could escape the weight of the world for a while, but even in this peaceful setting, the tension between them remained. Ryan took a deep breath. Princess, I've been thinking. I've seen your abilities. You're more than just a ruler's daughter. You're a strategist, a leader. Zira looked up at him, her emerald eyes narrowing as if considering his words. And what of it, Captain? You think I should be grateful for your recognition? Her tone was sharp, but there was a hint of something else, a trace of vulnerability she rarely showed. Ryan held his hands up in a gesture of peace. No, I didn't mean it like that. It's clear to me that you're more than what the Emperor believes you to be. You're capable of more than just sitting on a throne. Zira studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. The Emperor sees me as a tool, a means to an end. I am his daughter, but my value lies in how I can further his plans for the Empire. But I have other thoughts. I have dreams, Captain. Dreams that don't include marriage and politics. Ryan's heart softened at her words. He had seen enough of the Zorath Empire's politics to know how ruthless they could be. Power, status, and tradition ruled everything, including the princess's future. He couldn't imagine the burden she carried, the weight of her family's, expectations pressing down on her. I understand, Ryan said quietly, but I can't pretend to know what it's like to be in your position. All I can do is try to help, if you'll let me. Zira gave a bitter laugh. Help me? You're here as a tool of your own government. You've been sent to ensure my marriage goes through so that the peace treaty will be signed. You're not here to help me. You're here to make sure things go according to plan. Ryan frowned, his hands clenched into fists. I'm not blind, Princess. I can see that this is more than just a marriage for you. You don't want this any more than I do. But I'm here to keep the peace. That's my job. Zira turned away from him, her gaze sweeping over the garden. You don't understand. I don't want to be a figurehead. I don't want to sit in a palace while my people suffer. I've been trained my whole life to rule, to fight, to think, to protect. But none of that matters when you're forced to marry someone you've never met, just to further a political agenda. Ryan stood in silence for a moment, absorbing her words. He had always respected leaders who were willing to fight for what they believed in, but Zira's frustration went beyond anything he had ever known. She wasn't just angry about her situation, she was angry about the system that had placed her in it. And Ryan, despite being an outsider in this alien world, couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for her determination. You're right, Ryan finally said. You deserve more than this. You deserve a chance to lead your people the way you see fit, not the way your father sees fit. Zira looked back at him, her expression softening just a little. And how do you plan to help me with that? You're just a soldier, Captain. What can you do? Ryan hesitated. He had no idea what he could do, but something about the way she spoke stirred something in him. The princess wasn't just some foreign ruler. She was a woman with her own dreams, her own desires, and her own sense of justice. She wasn't the pampered royalty he'd expected. She was a fighter, just like him. I don't know yet, Ryan said, his voice steady. But I won't just stand by and let you be used as a pawn. If there's a way to change things to help you, then I'll find it. Zira studied him carefully. For the first time, she seemed to take a genuine interest in what he had to say. She didn't just see him as a soldier, and she didn't just see him as a potential husband. For a moment, there was a flicker of understanding between them. That was when Ryan realized something he hadn't expected. He had come to this palace expecting to carry out a simple mission, but it was quickly becoming clear that there was far more at stake than a peace treaty. He was becoming more invested in Zira's cause than he had ever anticipated. As the days passed, Ryan's respect for Zira grew. They spent more time together, discussing strategies, politics, and what they could do to change the empire. While the emperor continued to push for the marriage, Zira quietly plotted her own future. She was determined to find a way to regain control of her life, and Ryan was beginning to believe that, together, they could make that happen. But as their bond grew stronger, so did the risks. The emperor had no intention of letting his daughter out of his grasp. And as the marriage date neared, the tension in the palace reached new heights. The clock was ticking, and both Ryan and Zira knew that the moment they had dreaded was fast approaching. The days were slipping by faster than Ryan had anticipated. With each passing moment, the reality of his situation became more pressing. The marriage to Princess Zira was just days away, and the peace treaty that had brought him here still hung in the balance. But despite all the royal pageantry and the political games being played in the palace, Ryan couldn't shake the growing sense of unease that had taken root in his chest. The more he learned about the Zorath Empire, the more He realized that the threats to its stability were far more dangerous than anyone had told him. Zira had not been idle. She had always been a thinker, a strategist, and over the past few weeks, she had begun to reach out to some of the other factions within the Empire, trying to form alliances that might give her more control over her own future. She had begun, meeting secretly with the leaders of the Zorath military, as well as a few influential figures within the royal court who seemed sympathetic to her cause. It was clear to Ryan that Zira was not content to simply be married off and silenced. She wanted to change things, to reshape her destiny, and he found himself drawn into her plan. One evening, after the sun had set and the sky was painted with the colors of twilight, Ryan met with Zira in a quiet corner of the palace gardens. The air was cool, and the scent of alien flowers filled the space around them. Zira had sent a message, asking him to come alone, and Ryan had arrived to find her waiting in the shadows, her figure barely visible in the dim light. "You're late," Zira said, though there was no hint of anger in her voice. It was a statement of fact, one that Ryan had come to expect from her. "I had some business to take care of," Ryan replied, his voice low. He had learned to navigate the palace's complex web of politics and intrigue, but he still didn't trust many of the people around him. "What's going on, Princess? You've been meeting with the military leaders, haven't you?" Zira gave a small nod, her eyes flashing with determination. "Yes, I've been laying the groundwork for something big. The Empire is crumbling." "Ryan, my father is too focused on power to see it. There are factions within the military, within the nobility, that are planning to overthrow him, and I don't trust them." Ryan frowned. "You think they'll try to move against you?" "I know they will," Zira said, her voice sharp. "The peace treaty is important to them because it will solidify my father's rule. But there are those who want the throne for themselves. They'll stop at nothing to make sure the treaty fails, and that includes me." Ryan's heart tightened. He had known that Zira's position was precarious, but hearing her speak with such certainty made it feel all too real. He had to admit, Zira was right. The Empire was unstable, and her father's control over it was more fragile than anyone had let on. But there was a larger question that Ryan couldn't shake. What could he do? He was a soldier, a diplomat at best, but nothing more than a pawn in a game far beyond his understanding. "Then what's our next move?" Ryan asked, his tone serious. Zira looked up at him, her eyes hard with resolve. "We need to act before they do. I've already arranged for a secret meeting with a few key leaders who are loyal to me. If we can secure their support, we can stop this coup before it starts." Ryan felt a surge of determination within him. He had come to this alien world to keep the peace, but now it seemed that peace would only be possible if they took control of the situation themselves. He had to help Zira, not just because it was his mission, but because he truly believed she could be a leader who would change the fate of her people. "I'll help," Ryan said firmly, "but we'll need to be careful. This isn't going to be easy. And if the wrong people find out about what you're planning..." Zira nodded. "I know. But I can't sit by while others decide my fate. I won't be a puppet of my father or anyone else. I have my own future to fight for." Over the next few days, Ryan and Zira worked together to make her plans a reality. They moved in secret, carefully gathering allies within the palace and beyond. They reached out to influential military leaders who had grown disillusioned with the Emperor's rule, convincing them that a new future was possible. Ryan, despite his initial reluctance, found himself acting as Zira's protector, guarding her every step of the way. He was no longer just a soldier tasked with keeping the peace. He had become an integral part of a dangerous plan that could change the course of the entire empire. But the deeper they got, the more the danger became clear. Zira's movements hadn't gone unnoticed. The Emperor's spies were everywhere, and it wasn't long before rumors began to spread. Ryan could feel the walls closing in around them. They couldn't afford any mistakes. One night, as they prepared for their next secret meeting with an important ally, disaster struck. Ryan had been standing guard near the royal chambers when he caught sight of movement in the shadows. His instincts kicked in. He quickly moved to intercept, but before he could react, a figure stepped forward, their face hidden by a dark hood. "Captain Walker!" The voice was low, almost a whisper, but it sent a chill down his spine. "We know what you're doing. You and the princess are playing a dangerous game." Ryan's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his weapon, but the stranger raised a hand in a calming gesture. "You don't want to make this a confrontation. Not yet. But know this. If you continue to support the princess in her efforts to defy the Emperor, you will have more enemies than you can count." Ryan's heart raced. He was caught. There was no denying it now. Zira's plan had been discovered, and they had no time to waste. Without warning, the figure disappeared into the shadows, leaving Ryan with only the weight of their threat to guide his next move. He rushed to Zira's chambers, his mind racing. When he arrived, Zira was already waiting for him, her expression tense. "We've been discovered," Ryan said urgently. "They know what we're planning." Zira's face hardened. "Then we have no time to waste. We move tonight." The atmosphere in the palace had changed. The once grand halls now felt like a maze of shadows, filled with whispers of conspiracy. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every step, every movement. His instincts told him that danger was closer than ever. The threat had been real, and the mysterious figure who had confronted him in the shadows only confirmed what he feared. Their plan was no longer a secret. The Emperor knew, and he was making preparations to stop them. That night, Ryan and Zira met in a quiet corner of the palace, far from prying eyes. They had a secret meeting planned with one of Zira's allies, General Kale, a seasoned military leader who had been a key part of their alliance. He had promised to meet them in the lower levels of the palace, where the Imperial Guard's reach was weakest. But Ryan couldn't help but feel uneasy as they walked through the corridors. "This doesn't feel right," Ryan said quietly, his eyes scanning the shadows. Zira, walking ahead, didn't respond immediately. She too was feeling the weight of the situation. She had known her father's empire was unstable, but she had hoped that her secret allies could help her avert disaster. She had hoped that they could create the change her people needed without bloodshed. But now, she feared the worst. They arrived at the meeting point, a small, dimly lit chamber deep in the palace's lower levels. General Kale was waiting for them, but as soon as Ryan stepped inside, he felt something was off. The general's face was pale, his eyes darting around nervously. "General Kale?" Zira's voice cut through the silence. "What's going on? You said this was a secure location." The general's lips trembled, and for a moment, Ryan thought he might collapse. "It's a trap, Princess," he whispered. "They know everything. The Emperor's spies have been watching us. I tried to warn you." Zira's heart sank. She had trusted Kale, relied on him for their plan. She had considered him one of the few true allies she had left in the palace. But now, as the truth sunk in, she realized that they were being played. The general had betrayed them. "Why?" Ryan demanded, stepping forward. His hand instinctively rested on his sidearm, ready for anything. "Why would you betray us?" Kyle looked away, his face full of regret. "I didn't want this. I thought I could protect you, Princess. But the Emperor's forces are too powerful. I was offered a choice: help them stop you, or watch my family be destroyed." Zira's anger flared. She had always known the political games played in the palace could be brutal, but she hadn't expected this kind of betrayal, especially from someone she had trusted. She had seen Kale as an ally, someone who could help her change the future of the Zorath Empire. But now, she saw him for what he was, a man too weak to stand against the Emperor's power. "You think you can save your family by helping my father?" Zira's voice was cold, filled with contempt. "You're just another pawn in his game. You've given up your honor for fear." Kyle flinched at her words. "You don't understand, Princess. There's no future for me if I don't do this. I couldn't protect you, not when I'm already fighting for my own survival." Ryan stepped closer to Zira, his eyes narrowing. "We need to leave. Now." Before Zira could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. Ryan's senses heightened, and his hand went to his weapon. The betrayal was unfolding faster than he had anticipated. They had to move quickly. "Go," Kale said urgently. "They're coming. The Emperor's guards will be here any minute. Take the secret passage. It leads out of the palace." Zira hesitated for a moment, torn between anger and the urgency of the situation. "You've betrayed us, Kyle. But I'll remember what you did. You've sealed your fate." With that, Zira turned and motioned for Ryan to follow. They sprinted down the narrow corridor toward the hidden exit, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Ryan kept his eyes on their surroundings, his senses sharp as they moved swiftly through the darkened palace. The passage Kale had mentioned was hidden behind a set of old tapestries, and as they pushed them aside, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into even greater danger. The passage was narrow and winding, the air thick with dust. As they moved deeper into the hidden tunnels beneath the palace, Ryan couldn't help but glance back, his mind racing with questions. Who else had betrayed them? Was this the end of their plan? They reached the exit, a small concealed door that led out into the courtyard. But as Zira pushed the door open, they were met with a terrifying sight. A squad of Imperial guards waiting for them, weapons raised. Ryan acted quickly, his training kicking in as he pulled Zira behind him, taking cover behind a nearby column. The guards didn't hesitate. They moved forward, advancing slowly but surely. "You can't escape, Princess!" one of the guards shouted, his voice harsh. "The Emperor has spoken. You will return to the palace or you will be destroyed." Zira's mind raced. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. She had trusted Kale, and now they were cornered, trapped by the very forces she had hoped to overthrow. But even in the face of danger, she refused to give up. She had come too far to back down now. Ryan glanced at her, his expression determined. "We're not done yet, Princess. We'll fight our way out. We have to." Without another word, Ryan stepped out from behind the column, drawing his weapon. The sound of blaster fire filled the air, and Zira followed suit, pulling out her own weapon. They had no choice but to fight their way out. The guards were closing in, but Ryan wasn't going to let them take Zira without a fight. As the battle raged around them, Ryan and Zira fought side by side, their trust in each other growing with each passing moment. They were no longer just allies. They were partners in a fight for their future, for the future of the Zorath Empire. But even as they fought, Zira couldn't shake the crushing weight of betrayal. General Kyle's face haunted her thoughts. Had he truly cared for her, or had his loyalty always been to the Emperor? The battle in the courtyard raged on, the air filled with the sound of blaster fire and the shouts of Imperial guards. Zira and Ryan fought with all their strength, moving with precision and determination. Despite the odds, they pushed forward, refusing to back down. But the guards kept coming, and it was clear they couldn't hold their ground forever. Ryan glanced at Zira, his face grim. "We need to get out of here now." Zira nodded, her eyes flashing with resolve. They couldn't win this fight. They needed to escape. There was no time to waste. Ryan quickly scanned the area, looking for any way out. That's when he spotted it, a narrow, winding path leading toward the outer wall of the palace. "Over there!" Ryan shouted, pointing toward the escape route. "Move!" Zira didn't hesitate. She followed him, darting through the chaos of the battlefield as they made their way toward the path. The Imperial guards, caught off guard by their sudden shift in direction, hesitated for just a moment, but that was enough for Ryan and Zira to break free. The narrow path led them to an old, forgotten gate hidden in the thick wall of the palace. It had clearly been used for centuries as a secret exit for the royal family, and now it was their only way out. Ryan pushed the gate open, the ancient wood creaking as it gave way. They stepped out into the cool night air, the stars above them, offering little comfort in the face of the danger that was closing in around them. They had no time to waste. They needed to disappear, to get as far from the palace as possible. "I've arranged for a ship to take us to the edge of the galaxy," Zira said, her voice steady despite the chaos they had just escaped. "It's a small private transport. No one will know where we're going." Ryan didn't ask any more questions. At this point, it didn't matter how they got there. What mattered was getting away from the palace, away from the Emperor's reach. They couldn't risk staying in the heart of the Empire any longer. They had to leave, and they had to do it quickly. As they made their way through the darkened streets of the palace's outer district, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows seemed to move around them, and every step felt like it might be their last. But they kept moving forward, faster now, toward the spaceport where the ship was waiting. They reached the docking bay in record time, the familiar sight of the small transport ship bringing a sense of relief. The ship was simple, unmarked, and designed for discretion, a far cry from the grandeur of the Zorath royal fleet. Zira led Ryan aboard, her movements swift and sure. "Everything's ready," Zira said as they entered the ship. She quickly moved to the controls, setting a course for the farthest reaches of the galaxy. "We're going to the rim. It's the only place we can hide." Ryan strapped himself into the seat next to her, his mind racing. They were leaving everything behind: the palace, the Empire, their former lives. There was no going back now. They were fugitives, and the only thing that mattered was survival. The ship powered up, its engines humming to life as they lifted off into the cold night sky. Ryan looked out the window, watching as the palace, once a symbol of power, grew smaller and smaller, eventually disappearing from view. They were free, for now. The journey to the edge of the galaxy was long and treacherous. The rim was a place few ventured to, a region of space on the fringes of known civilization. It was a place of lawlessness and danger, where anything could happen, and where their presence would go unnoticed. It was the perfect place to disappear. As the days passed, Zira and Ryan settled into a routine on the ship. They spent most of their time in the small cockpit, navigating the vast stretches of space. Zira was focused on the ship's controls, her mind always on the next move, while Ryan kept watch, alert for any signs of danger. They didn't know who might be after them, but they both understood that the farther they got from the Empire, the safer they would be. One evening, as they sat together in the small galley, eating a simple meal, Ryan finally spoke. "You don't talk much about what happens when we get to the rim," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "What's the plan?" Zira looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. "There's no plan. Not yet. The rim is wild. It's a place where people go to start over, to hide from their pasts. We'll find a way to survive, but we need to lay low. The more attention we draw to ourselves, the more dangerous it becomes." Ryan nodded. He understood. It was just the two of them now, far from the empire they had known, and the world they had once lived in seemed like a distant memory. But there was something else in Zira's eyes, a determination that he had come to admire. She wasn't just running from the Empire. She was running towards something, a future she could control. "Do you ever regret it?" Ryan asked, his voice hesitant. "Leaving everything behind?" Zira's gaze softened, and for a moment she seemed lost in thought. "I don't regret it," she said quietly. "I've spent my whole life living under the shadow of my father's rule, playing his games, doing his bidding. But now I get to make my own choices. I get to choose what happens next." Ryan was silent for a moment, taking in her words. He had never been in a position where his choices had so much weight, where the future of an entire people rested on his decisions. But he admired Zira for it. She had found her strength, even in the darkest of times. "We'll make it," Ryan said, his voice firm. Zira gave him a small smile, a rare expression of warmth in the midst of all the uncertainty. "Yes, we will." As the days turned into weeks, their journey to the Rim continued. They faced the challenges of space travel, dodging pirates, navigating asteroid fields, and dealing with mechanical issues. But through it all, they grew closer. Zira's leadership and resourcefulness had kept them alive, and Ryan's loyalty had been unwavering. But even as they drew closer to the Rim, both knew that the hardest part was still to come. The Emperor would not let them escape without a fight. And once they reached the Rim, they would be faced with new challenges, new dangers, and an uncertain future. But whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The journey to the Rim had been long, the quiet of space punctuated only by the hum of the ship's engines. Every day, Ryan and Zira grew more accustomed to their new life. They were no longer fugitives in the heart of the Zorath Empire, but wanderers on the edge of the galaxy. It was a strange feeling, freedom, but also uncertainty. No one knew who they were out here, and that was both a relief and a burden. The Rim was everything Zira had hoped it would be, wild, untamed, and full of opportunities to start anew. But it was also dangerous. Pirates, mercenaries, and smugglers ruled the Rim. Law and order were distant concepts, and survival depended on strength, cunning, and luck. Zira knew this better than anyone. She had heard stories of the Rim her entire life, tales of rebellion, of people carving out their own lives away from the control of empires. As they approached a small planet on the outer Rim, Zira couldn't help but feel a sense of hope stir within her. This could be their fresh start. The planet was known for its rough terrain and harsh climate, but it was also home to a thriving community of people who had built their own society away from the power of any empire. There, Zira believed, they could make a difference. "We need to be careful when we land," Ryan said, his voice low as he glanced at Zira from the pilot's seat. "This place might be safer than the Empire, but it's still a risk. People here don't trust outsiders." Zira nodded, her expression serious. "I know, but we can't stay in hiding forever. If we want to create something better, we have to take risks." Ryan wasn't sure what they were about to find on the planet, but he trusted Zira. He had seen her fight for what she believed in, and he had seen her become more than just a princess. She had become a leader, a woman who wanted to change the world, not just survive in it. As the ship descended toward the planet, Zira could feel the weight of her past lifting ever so slightly. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't a prisoner to her father's empire. She was free to make her own decisions, free to build a future on her terms. The thought was both thrilling and overwhelming. They landed in a small settlement near the planet's surface, a place where the people lived in harmony with the harsh environment. The buildings were simple, made from the rough materials that the planet offered. There were no grand palaces here, no towering spires, just people living and working together to survive. As they stepped off the ship, the dust of the planet's surface swirling around them, they were greeted by a group of locals. A tall man with a weathered face and piercing blue eyes stepped forward, his expression neutral but curious. "Newcomers?" the man asked, his voice rough. "You're far from the core worlds." Zira stepped forward confidently. "Yes, we are. My name is Princess Zira, and this is Captain Ryan Walker. We've come to find a place where we can build a new future. A place where we can contribute, not just take." The man studied her for a moment, his gaze lingering on the royal insignia she wore. But then he seemed to relax. "We don't care about your past here. What matters is what you're willing to do now. If you're willing to work, there's a place for you. Zira nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. We're willing. Ryan, standing beside her, felt a sense of relief. They had made it. They had escaped the Empire, and now they had a chance to build something of their own. But he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. This planet might be a safe haven for now, but it wasn't a place without challenges. They would have to prove themselves, just like everyone else. Over the next few weeks, Zira and Ryan became part of the settlement's community. They worked hard, alongside the locals, helping to build shelters, repair equipment, and grow crops. Zira, with her natural leadership, quickly earned the respect of the people. She didn't try to rule over them, but instead, she listened, learned, and offered her expertise wherever she could. Ryan, too, found his place. He was a soldier, but here, there was no war to fight, no enemy to face. Instead, he helped protect the settlement from the dangers of the planet, the wild animals, the harsh weather, and the occasional band of raiders that would venture too close. As the days turned into months, their new life became more settled. Zira's vision for a better future slowly began to take shape. She worked with the locals to create a system where everyone had a say, where power wasn't concentrated in the hands of a few. She encouraged cooperation, innovation, and fairness, hoping to build a society that would stand as a beacon of hope for those who had been oppressed by empires. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the settlement, Zira and Ryan sat together on the roof of one of the buildings looking out at the vast expanse of the planet. "Do you ever miss it?" Zira asked softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "The palace, the empire, the power." Ryan thought for a moment, the question catching him off guard. He had spent so much time fighting for peace, for survival, that he hadn't thought about what he left behind. The empire, with its power struggles and politics, seemed so distant now. "No," he said finally, his voice steady. "I don't miss it. What we have here, what we're building, it's real. It's something worth fighting for." Zira smiled, her eyes softening as she turned to him. "I feel the same way. We've left behind the life that was forced upon us. Now we get to decide who we are and what we can become." Ryan looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. This woman, who had once been trapped in the chains of her father's empire, was now free. Together, they had forged a new life, one that was theirs, not dictated by anyone else. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in that moment, as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Ryan knew that they had made the right choice. The road ahead would be difficult, but they would face it together. They had escaped the past, and now they could create the future they had always dreamed of. Zira's voice broke the silence. "We've only just begun, Ryan. There's still so much more to do." Ryan smiled, his hand resting on hers. "And we'll do it, together."